So joining me now is Chief Percy from Benson. Chief, tell me a little bit about your background before we get into the case.
Okay. I've been involved in law enforcement for almost 31 years now. I've spent 28 of those years with the town of Benson, but I've also worked as a federal park ranger for the National Park Service, and I worked about 2 years with the Chapel Hill Police Department. When I started in Benson in '95, I stayed for about 6 years, went to Chapel Hill, and then came back to Benson and worked my way up to chief.
So I would imagine you encountered this case obviously before you became chief because it happened many years ago, well,
Yes, ma'am.
2017. So what was the first time you got involved in this case and what did you learn about it?
At the time Cole was reported to us as a missing person, I was captain, but I was still doing investigations. So I was one of the people that got the call. He was reported to us as missing the day after Thanksgiving in the early morning hours. And I got a phone call later that weekend notifying me of the missing persons report.
How quickly did this case turn from a missing person case to a case that you believed was a homicide?
Uh, Fairly quickly, but it was also a lot of things were up in the air as well. During the first few weeks of the investigation, myself and the SBI prepared a great many search warrants, for cell phone data, bank records, Google data, and stuff like that. And it became pretty clear pretty quickly that there was no activity on any account or platform that Cole was would have been using. So that was my first indication that there was a possibility that foul play was involved. But it took many more months and countless interviews to finally find that one person that would admit that he had been killed.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there were huge searches, community members, community organizations. Is that helpful in a case like this when you have so many people coming out, or is it also a little bit difficult because you can't manage all these searches? You can't control what they're doing.
Yeah, we had two. There were basically two different types of searches that were going on. You had those searches that were on the law enforcement side, and then you had the searches by the family of Cole and the private individuals that were trying to assist them. We, you're right, we couldn't manage the private searches at all. They were going and doing and really not coordinating with us, which was their right. From a law enforcement perspective, that was pretty tightly controlled. Myself and the SBI would plot out different areas we wanted to look at. We'd have there numerous agencies coming in, including the SBI and surrounding law enforcement, and we kept a pretty tight, rein on that going on because it's a criminal investigation. You have to be on top of it.
And pretty early on, you started talking to the people he was traveling with, and this story developed that there was people in a car. He was driving. There was some kind of a drug transaction, and that he jumped out of the car, and then something happened to him. What were you able to piece together from these different interviews?
The initial part of that story is correct. Yes, there was a drug deal that took place in Wayne County. They received the package that they'd driven from Minnesota to get, and as they were driving back to Minnesota, something happened to cause Cole apparently to become paranoid. It's pretty well established that the drugs were thrown out the window between here and I think Newton Grove, and by the time they got into Benson, it was said that Cole was freaking out. I have no way of knowing that, but that's what was said. So he parks the car, he gets out, and initially we were told that he ran away. Um, as we dug into it more, we were able to locate video footage that showed him and a second individual walking through a parking lot close to where the car was parked. So it was pretty clear he didn't run away. He was walking and didn't appear to be in distress from the limited video and stuff that we had. So that was our another indication that things may not be as they seemed.
Yeah, and I know you were able to, at some point, arrest, was it four people
Yes.
for lying to investigators because you were able to say, you told us this story and it wasn't true. And then also concealing a death because you believed that he had been killed. You just didn't have a body.
Correct.
And without that, it's very, very hard to prosecute.
Yeah.
What was your goal? Did you hope having them in jail would maybe make somebody talk?
That was a an offshoot of the original intent. We filed the charges because that's what we could prove at that time. The general belief was yes, he was dead, and that somebody in that group or closely associated to it had been the one to potentially kill him. But like you said, we didn't have a body. We had no physical evidence that would indicate that he was in fact deceased. So we went with the obstruction of justice and concealment of a death because we could prove that. Now, having said that, yes, the hope was that some sort of deal could be worked out. Of those four, that maybe one of them would reveal his burial site. So if nothing else, we could recover his remains and return those to the family. Unfortunately, it didn't play out that way, and they were eventually released.
Yeah, and I know how frustrating was that for you and for your investigators because here you have worked so hard on this case. You believe one or more of these people is involved, but you just don't have enough to charge them at a higher rate. And the judge just said, yeah, they got to go. They got to go out.
Yeah, and I understand the reasoning behind it because they'd already served more time than they would have gotten if they'd gotten a conviction for those charges. So they couldn't hold them any longer, unfortunately. What was frustrating to us was, as the whole time they were in jail, we kept having conversations, with attorneys and sometimes even the defendants themselves, and we just could not get, that one break that we needed.
Yeah, and I mean that's got to be really hard. How unusual is that? That you know these guys aren't rocket scientists, right?
Right.
As you would say, when you're looking at most people who commit crimes. So the fact that you just could not locate his body, I mean, to this day, that's got to be really frustrating.
It is, because the one thing that I want to do is to be able to give Cole back to his family because they deserve that closure. One of the things that I promised, Chris and Kathy both, was that we'd never stop looking. I never promised them that we would charge anybody with killing him, but I promised that we'll never stop looking, and we haven't. It's frustrating to me on a personal level, because I've now invested 9 years in this, and we're still at it. And I hope to be able to make that phone call one day to tell Chris and Kathy that Cole's finally coming home.
Yeah, I mean, I know as a reporter, the last few years, anytime a body was found, anytime, anywhere in that area, and I shouldn't say a body, but
Yeah.
remains, bones, there
Hmm.
was always this thought, I wonder if it's Cole. I wonder if it's Cole.
Yeah.
Because things like this don't really happen that often in a small town, right?
That is correct. I mean, you rarely hear of someone just disappearing off the face of the earth, so to speak. And you're right. Every time that remains are recovered somewhere, one of the first text messages I get is often from Chris or Kathy, asking me to check in with whoever the agency is that might have it. Knowing or believing what we believe as to where he potentially was killed, you know, I focus more on reports that may come out of those areas and list, something in Raleigh doesn't really raise my alarm bells, but anything east of us does.
And in some ways, I think they've expressed that it's as important to just find him
Yeah.
as it is to figure out what happened. But there's a chance that you'll never figure out what happened, even if you do find him. As someone in law enforcement, is that a little bit frustrating because it's almost like it's within your grasp? You have these people, you just don't have the evidence.
Yeah, it is. It does frustrate you. We believe we know what happened. We believe that we know where the incident took place that led to him losing his life. We just don't know where he might have been taken from there, and we don't know hypothetically who pulled the trigger or whatever the method was. Um, and without that body, there's no way to track backwards from there to pin that on somebody.
You mentioned Kathy and Chris. Every investigator I know who's ever covered a cold case has developed a very close relationship with the families
Yeah.
because they're the ones that, you're keeping in touch with them. What is that like to have that relationship? Does that make you, more determined because you know how much they've suffered?
Yeah. It does pose problems, because you do develop a personal relationship with them. We've had some difficult conversations over the years as this investigation has moved forward. You know, and sometimes they'll ask questions that I can't provide them an answer to, or not authorized to, because it's critical to the investigation or something like that. I've tried to be as open and honest with them as I could, given the limitations that we do face, and the lack of certain facts that we just don't have an answer for. And I try to stay in touch with them as regularly as I can. And like I said, whenever there's human remains found, they're usually one of the first people to contact me, or I'll contact them. So we do stay in touch as much as we can, and I wish I could give them an answer, but right now we're just not at that stage yet.
And I think sometimes too, it is a testament to the families because they do often keep these cases in the public
Hmm.
eye,
Yeah,
even if they're being worked on consistently behind the scenes by law enforcement. And sometimes some, I hate to say this, but some victims get more attention than others, right?
right, right,
And so you hear something like, oh, young man might have been involved in a drug deal. It doesn't spark the same compassion
right.
as another case. But the reality is he's somebody's son. I mean,
Yeah,
he's, and
yeah.
every
My
victim is worthy, right?
One of my thoughts was from the very beginning of this was whether or not this was a drug deal going bad, or drugs were involved in it. He didn't deserve to die for it. And like you said, he's somebody's son.
Yeah. And what is your gut? I mean, do you just feel like this is the kind of thing it's going to take somebody, and whether it's a tip directly from somebody or an anonymous tip saying, "Hey, I know where the body is, the remains."
I think it's a combination. I mean, we still receive information probably monthly, from different people, and some, right off the bat are just someone talking. But there are others that, like, yeah, there could be a possibility with this, and those are the ones that we attack head on, and try to follow up on as quickly as possible. And it's difficult at times, because you don't want to get your hopes up, and you certainly don't want to get their hopes up. So I'm kind of,
You tread lightly. Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
tread
I, I
with
don't I don't
caution.
I don't call them every time something like that comes up, because I don't want to get their hopes up.
Just curious, and you may not know the answer to this. This is just off the top of my head. Do you know how many cold cases you have? How many unsolved murders? Is this it?
Unsolved, yeah, unsolved homicides. I think we have three. One is like from 1986.
So
Wait,
it's not the norm. It's
right?
not the norm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
I mean,
for
it's a
us,
small
no,
town. Yeah.
right?
So
Yeah,
very, very, very rare. Well, thank you for all your hard work on this. I know the family appreciates it. I know the community appreciates it.
yeah,
And fingers crossed that eventually something will rise to the surface and you guys will be able to solve this.
yeah. I hope so. I mean, like I said, I promised them we'd never stop looking, and we won't. Whether I'm chief and retired, or whatever, we have capable people that will continue that search.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.